I've got a weird one. If anyone knows what worked for agriculture in Iraq means, please let me know. Be me. In college through the 2000s era. Mom is a big shot professor, and as a result, I'm a college brat. Hung around as a kid helping out. Teenager in various psych studies for side department family friends. Spent 8 years at the uni for undergrad and grad school, even though they begged me to apply to a more prestigious uni. What I'm saying is that I love my college. It's a second home to me. So, I helped out a lot. We had a certain VIP that loved being on campus. Let's call him the Arab. First and last names are palindromes of each other. Even weirder, it's just letter plus AA plus letter. The dean is afraid of this guy. So is my boss in IT. The Arab asked my boss to help him write an email. He's notoriously bad with technology. And he has some crazy emails in his contact list. I'm talking entire categories of mostly past, and a few, for the 2000s anyway, still elected, including a young Barack Obama in Chicago. This guy adopts orphans as kids and sends them to our med school after he ships them to boarding school. He's done this for 7 men and women now, all wonderful people. He also bought a historical train museum so he could live in it, and spends his time running the little train that people can get rides on. One of his sons runs the museum. He failed out of med school, and the staff was paid really well. His staff gets all profits and bonuses that the museum makes during Eid. He also loves building new buildings on campus. He's even so humble, he just wants his name on the bricks, so the college can name the building after someone for money. He's a wonderful guy, right? That's what everyone thought, that he's a gentle soul. So the dean comes up to me and says, "Special assignment. I am now attached to the Arab permanently whenever he's here or on call. They will pay me double during these times." Of course I accept. Making bank helping out the town saint? Before you get ideas, the guy really was as nice to me in private as he was in public. He was really insistent on fixing on how I dress and act. He bought me really nice work clothes and really unusual amulets and beaded wrist wraps made out of jade and onyx. I don't know what kind of religion he belonged to because he hated Abrahamic symbols, yet he loved Christmas. But he was devout and it felt Christianish. In time, he was a friend and mentor, and he was a lonely man. His wife had passed long ago. The first couple years were amazing. We met Bill Clinton's former Sec of Defense. They smiled and chatted and caught up. Yet, if you haven't figured this out yet, he knows practically everybody in the government. Part of my job was securing box seats for him at every major speaker invitation, so he could meet them and chat, and get pics of him and the person, and note down ideas for thank emails, and set up gift reminders and all of that. The Arab was functionally, technologically illiterate. One night, he asks about my childhood. I tell him and he laughs. He's delighted because he lived in a hotel near where I grew up for a few years. Only problem is the hotel is a 5-star one. I used to stand on the beach and point at it and promise my parents that someday we will go on a vacation and stay in a place like that when I have a career. I told him that, and he looked sad and said his company paid for it and to be careful about wanting things like that. One night during a warm summer, he became what I can only describe as melancholic. He said he lost his wife, an assistant that I reminded him of, and most of his staff, all in one night. Said someone had planted bombs at his agricultural business in Iraq in his office. He stood outside talking with some guards when they went off. He was evacuated by the guards and his remaining staff were lost to bandits, who then broke in and machine gunned the entire staff. The thing is, this happened during the Hussein era. I've asked other Iraqis and they said it was an incredibly safe time, and that story is unusual. Here's another one. A few years later, I meet a professor through my mom. Cool dude, double doctorate, lieutenant colonel, guy was a fucking badass at Nam, had a bunch of shit still in him from some op behind the lines in Lithuania of all places, said that he had to kill a guy, and he rounded the corner and a guy jumped out from behind some trash with a Makarov and put a round into his chest, and his buddies had to drag his ass back to the US Embassy. Showed me all of these shrapnel wounds, and this very badass photo of him as a junior officer, carrying a Mod Deuce with his first platoon that he ever commanded. He was always very honest with me about his life, and said he volunteered for any cloak and dagger shit because he got off on it so hard. He was notorious for ops going sideways and living through it. His back got messed up because a helicopter crashed, and he had to crawl back to base with the survivors in Asia somewhere. Entire office filled with pics of him getting medals pinned, in the shit, shaking hands, all very cool stuff. One day, I'm helping him out, trying to build his class for him, and I ask what working in an agricultural business in the Middle East means. He got really quiet and scary, and this old hunchbacked man loomed in front of me with the most pissed off expression that I have ever seen. He put his face practically against mine and said, "Stay the fuck away from him." Things were never quite the same between us after that. Still an awesome dude. Here's another one. 15 years later. I work for a very cool corporation now. We get a new head of security. CEO said he pulled some strings and we are getting him. End of story. He's a really charming dude and talks about safety procedures and drills nonstop. I ask him what he does. I guarded crops in Iraq, did a lot of agricultural work. I ask him about that phrase and say that I knew somebody else who used to say that was his job, and he had a lot of weird stories. The guy joked and said he has a lot of weird stories too, and to treasure them. I told him the Arab's name and he smiled, and said his mentor talked about him when he was first in the service, and that I am very lucky to have had him in my life. And another one. The Arab had a strange quirk on top of other strange quirks. He made me Photoshop him as pale as possible whenever we would get these handshakes with VIPs. Probably the only time I'd ever seen him get agitated. He would just stand behind my chair screaming, "Whiter! Whiter!" over and over until I was making him practically a ghost. And only then would he be happy. I got a nice vacation out of him once. We drove up to DC. I had to prep a laptop and a PowerPoint for him. PowerPoint was completely innocuous. It was about a charity drive he was doing to build a monument for vets killed in the Middle East. He offered to put me and my girlfriend up in DC if we agreed to sleep in separate rooms, if I would come along and make sure his laptop was 100% working with the presentation. I get there, he drops me off a little ways away from the Capitol at the Trump Hotel, and tells me to have fun and that he's meeting old friends, and he will be unavailable. Really nice guy. Said I did an amazing job, and started crying and talking about how everyone will be remembered now, and gave him a really oddly shaped bracelet made out of black pearls. The saddest part was his death. Someone had broken into the museum, tied him to a chair, destroyed all of the security NVRs with probably a sledgehammer, took the hard drives, and just sliced the old man open. The officers that moonlighted as campus guards said that it looked like it was a robbery. The whole museum was ransacked. The town did a memorial for him. The museum is gone now. His family sold off all of the items and the old mansion. Have you ever experienced weird situations from the weather itself? Anything from dangerous tornadoes, hurricanes and sandstorms, and crazy thunderstorms? Maybe you've seen strange shadows and other things during bad weather as well. Mother Nature can be strange too, and I want to share you all with an example. I don't frequent 4chan, so I won't be doing any green text. I would probably suck at it, so I apologize for that. I also don't go to 4chan, but I always hear stories coming from this place, so I figured I would come here to share mine. I was around 9 to 10 years old at this time. It was mid-fall, and I was at school. The weather wasn't particularly windy, but there are a few small breezes occasionally. It's recess, and I was playing with two kids that I became friends with after a month of being in this school. We were playing on a tetherball, and there was a few fall leaves all over the place. Wind suddenly started to pick up out of nowhere, but we haven't really paid much attention to it and kept playing. Suddenly, both kids stopped and stared at my feet in utter shock. Confused, I also looked down. A whirlwind was circling me. I stared for a good 5 seconds, but the winds kept spinning around me. Becoming more spooked, I decided to jump out of it, not feeling any wind as I do, and it continues to follow me for a few seconds longer, and suddenly, it stops right after the recess end bell rang. After that, the kids I was hanging out with started changing their attitude towards me. They started to hang out with me less and less, telling me to go away because I caused bad luck. As an adult now, I never really figured out the connection on what happened to me, and those friends treating me differently after what happened. And I'm pretty certain it isn't normal for a whirlwind to circle around you and chase you. Whatever the case, to this day, I cannot explain it. Maybe it was a ghost, or maybe Mother Nature itself decided to curse me. Who knows? But maybe X can enlighten me. Good afternoon, X. Recently, I had lunch with an old friend from high school. We did some catching up, talking about old classmates, when a mutual friend of ours came up in conversation, and my friend asked what I knew about her. For clarity, let's call my friend Sam, and the classmate Amy. I told Sam that while I kept in contact with Amy for a brief while, she basically stopped talking to me, and I hadn't heard from her in a while. Sam told me that no one had. One day Amy got a new boyfriend, possibly. I wasn't clear on what her relationship was to this guy. Then, suddenly, stopped showing up to the apartment, stopped paying her half of the rent, and didn't even come to grab her things. Sam one day matched with Amy on Bumble and said that while they were talking, Amy didn't recognize Sam, didn't recognize anything brought up about her hometown, and ended with saying, "Add my snap," which makes no sense. We've all had each other's snaps since middle school. When this was pointed out, Amy said that she meant her daddy Dom. Their matching strikes me as odd to begin with because, while Sam is a bi woman, Amy has always been the most straight woman I've ever met. This is where I get a little schizo, and why I've come to the most schizo people that I know, because does this sound at all like she might be getting or being used for trafficking? We live in Nebraska, itself a hotbed for trafficking in the US, and not far from an infamous spot called the Thunder Road Truck Stop, where it's not hard to find a woman in a very bad place. I've reached out to Amy's old roommate and her sister to try and get some more information. Any Nebraska nuns hear anything similar? Anyone else thinks this sounds shady as fuck? Here's a story of something that happened recently. I'm not super into the paranormal, but I thought I would share. It unnerves the fuck out of me. Late November this year, had a large blizzard slam through Kansas. In some areas of Kansas, there were 7+ inches of snow. I live in the northeastern part of the state, inside of Topeka. I have a coworker that lives in the Potawatomi Reservation, who believes in the tribal religions and legends. He also keeps up on what's going on with the Meskwaki Nation and the separatist group in Oklahoma. I'm Potawatomi too, but not into any of that. My dad was too, but now he's full Christian. Due to the oncoming storm, the warehouse workers, which included me and my coworker, got off work early. My coworker called me to ask if I wanted to go deer hunting. Sure, whatever, but who the fuck goes and hunts deer in a goddamn snowstorm? He is full-tier redneck. He has no windows and a half-finished house, but uses sheets to keep air from coming in. He sleeps on the floor on a mattress, with guns lying everywhere. He has a huge fucking wood-burning stove from the late 1800s that he uses for stuff like how a modern stove is used. At that point, it was lightly snowing, so I decided to go. I let my dad know, and he just told me to be prepared in case shit hits the fan with the storm. Grabbed my Remington and drove 30 minutes north, packed 180 grain soft-tip rounds. Finally got up there, went out to the forest with my coworker to go get some deer. Not even 10 minutes into the hunt, we were rounding a line of pine trees along a fence line and spotted a dead buck. It had been dead probably not even 30 minutes. The blood was still kind of fresh and everything. The storm was steadily getting worse, but my coworker decided to just start fucking taking it apart right there. Oh cool, I didn't even need to use my gun. As we walked up, he noticed that the buck had been torn to shit. The only scavengeable thing on this carcass's body was the rear legs. Immediately, I had a bad feeling, and I loaded my Remington because no fucking coyote can do that level of damage. A mountain lion? Maybe. There has been sightings in Kansas, but not to the point it makes me worry. It looked like someone had force-fed the deer a stick of dynamite and blew the fucking thing up. Its ribcage had been pried open, as if something had forced it apart and split it open. Meat here and there, fur fucking everywhere. Half its torso had been torn to shit. There was a small blood trail leading off, and he looked off in its direction. His demeanor changed immediately, and he had me squat down with him. He began examining the damage with me and began whispering, "Ouija goo. Ouija goo did this damage. We must get out of this area immediately, right fucking now." "Are you serious, dude? Like, it's probably a fucking mountain lion that did this." No goddamn puma can do damage like this. Ouija goo took this buck apart out of rage. We have to fucking bail out of the area, now. It'll come back to thrash the fucking carcass more. We were able to get the 2 legs, and he sprinted back to his property through the forest. I had to keep up. He was hauling fucking ass, and was obviously terrified. We got to his house, and he began speaking to his mom in Potawatomi. I don't know the language, so I recorded it, to have my dad try and decipher what the fuck they were talking about. Immediately, his mom began freaking her shit, and she had me grab my stuff and get on my way. Before she let me go, she told me to be safe. I was super curious and I'd asked her, "What the fuck? Dude, like, I'm unnerved, not fucking horrified. Can you explain what the fuck is going on?" She dragged me out in the middle of the fucking raging blizzard and had me get in my fucking truck. Gave me a goddamn Coca-Cola to sip on back to Topeka. Had to drive slowly, 30 minutes back, and showed my dad the video of their conversation. Within moments, he walked into the other room and grabbed a hammer. Haven't confronted Dad about what was said. Have gone to work and asked my coworker about it. He ignores me, but he wants to go squirrel hunting soon with me. He let me have the legs. They're at my sister's in a deep freeze in Oakland, near Billard Airport. Okay, I live in a secluded town with a lot of out opportunities. I love abandoned places and learned how to adapt in a lot of unfriendly spots. I've had a few nasty encounters with homeless crackheads, traps set by mental landlords, wild animal encounters, but one encounter that takes the cake happened to me a few years back. Be me, 23, a stupid adrenaline-loving dude bro, who now explores alone after trying one too many times to get his friends to tag along. I used old maps from my local library to scout out abandoned mines and mills on the outskirts of my town. At that time, I went cave diving almost every weekend. I had a few favorite spots, including a few swimming holes. Eventually, I started running out of fun spots and started going further and further out. Eventually, I found a surface mine that doesn't have any connecting trails via satellite on Google Maps, and I marked it on my GPS. Getting to it was one hell of a journey, as I needed to take multiple trips. Once I got to it, I noticed datura flowers absolutely everywhere, along with scraps of clothing. As gross as it sounds, some kids party a bit too hard and leave their dirty undergarments and clothing deep in the woods. After that mess, I attached a line and started climbing down the main shaft. That's when I hear a kid crying deep within the mine. I took some time to try and identify it, as shafts can easily throw back sound in odd ways. The same sound is repeated verbatim, like a recording. I instantly get bad vibes and I start heading up. The sound gets higher and louder, like a train horn that's moving towards you. I kept trying to rationalize it while climbing up as fast as I could. At the mouth of the mine, I realize I might have left a lost child to die in there. So I did the obvious thing and called the cops once I got back into cell range. My face when they capped every mine in a 20-mile radius with an explosion a few weeks after my exploration sesh. Even the harmless ones. Be me, 24, 2022. Outskirts of Bakhmut, Ukraine. It's freezing cold, and everyone is in low spirits. My comrades and I are supporting our guys in the city, which is being encircled by PMC Wagner. The days begin with a drone-dropping grenade about 40 meters down my trench. 4 casualties, all dead. About 15 minutes later, we come under heavy artillery barrage. A distant boom followed by an ear-piercing shriek. Then, a bone-rattling explosion. Repeat for about an hour. The entire time, I'm clutching a small icon of our Mother Mary, praying I'll see my parents again. About 30 minutes later, we see about 150 to 200 Wagner convicts advancing to us. We open fire and a firefight ensues. This lasts the rest of the day. We killed all of them and lost about only 15 of our own. We moved their bodies up and out of the trench in a pile, awaiting pickup. 10 p.m., we're huddled in the trench. I open my MRE supplied by the United States. Thank you. As we're eating, we hear twigs and logs snapping and guttural breathing. Think it's a wounded Wagner soldier and put my night vision on and prepare to finish him off. When I left my head above the trench, I am immediately blinded, as if looking at a bright light with night vision. I duck back down, take them off, then look again. I see this disgusting creature, tall and white with strands of greasy hair and a hunched over posture scouring the field. Only illuminated by the moonlight, I start shooting at it. At this point, others are looking as well. It looks at us and ignores us as it makes its way to the nearest fallen soldier. I watch as it lifts his arm and breaks it like a chicken wing and consumes the meat. It does the same to his legs and other arm before moving on to his torso, ripping open the ribcage with a sickening crack. I can't watch anymore, and I duck down and grab my icon again for safety. All night, all I could hear was wet snapping and loud eating of wet meat. After consuming our enemies, it went around and ate our fallen comrades from the previous day. I somehow fall asleep, and I wake up and look over the trench. All that remains are bits of flesh and the clothes of the dead soldiers. No one says anything as we pack up to advance closer to the city of Bakhmut. We get to our next position and we wait there for 3 days. The whole time, hearing the artillery and tank fire. After the 3rd day, it was announced that PMC Wagner had captured Bakhmut, and we were to retreat. As we were retreating, our truck was hit by artillery, and I was flung from the vehicle, unconscious. Wake up. It's nighttime. There are groaning dead and dying men around me, some on fire. I hear a familiar guttural breathing sound. Look around and I see the creature again, making its way from body to body, devouring the flesh. It leaves alive but wounded alone. It comes to me and picks my arm off the ground. I hadn't realized it was blown off. I watched this thing eat my fucking arm clean to the bone for about 5 minutes, pass out again, and wake up 2 days later in a hospital in western Ukraine. No one believes me and just assumes it's PTSD, discharged with pain pills. I am scared to go out at night. Who knows if that creature is the only one. I knew a girl who slit her wrists because the lit teacher wouldn't fuck her. Short and not that scary, but the shit actually happened. She was like hardcore seducing the poor 40-something-year-old guy, telling me and other friends how she wants him, and not just sexually. Her desires for the guy were akin to those furries that you find on the internet. She went on and on and on how she wants him to eat her, kill her, wear her skin, fuck her dismembered limbs, etc. But first, she wanted him to fuck her in the asshole inside his shitty Honda, so that's what she offered him one day, while dressed like a bimbo. The guy goes all crazy and yells at her, and said she better cut this shit out, with him being a married man and all. So she slit her wrists and just sat there in a hallway until someone noticed and called the wambulance. Oh, Jesus, the wambulance. She recovered, but was on suicide watch. I don't really know how to green text, but here's an attempt. B28. Have huge fight with hysterical girlfriend. Fight so huge, I get to sleep on the couch. She locks herself in our bedroom, screams alone for almost an hour, calling me every name in the book. Then, goes silent. Before going to sleep, a small voice in the back of my head tells me, "Dude, hide all of the knives in the apartment." I ignore it. It becomes almost a compulsion. I end up getting up, quietly get all the sharp objects out of the kitchen, and I hide them in the closet. 4 hours later, wake up from the sound of girlfriend manically going through every drawer in the kitchen, as if looking for something. Go like, "Hey babe, what are you looking for?" She says nothing. Turn lights on. She's in this complete Riri mode. Not blinking, like a stupor. Just looks at a spot on the wall, as her hands search the drawers for something. Dodged a bullet. I think she wanted to carve me up in my sleep. Dump her next day. Move out. Still miss her. I think we were soulmates. My friend who frequents this site and board said I should post this here. Yesterday, I was exploring a previously unexplored, as far as I'm aware, cave system, and was having a good time walking around until I came across a smallish hole at the back wall of the cave that was big enough to fit through comfortably. I'm a skinny guy, so I shined my flashlight through the hole and saw that it continued a ways. So I went through and walked down the passage, and this is when the smell came. It smelled like rotten meat and sulfur. I thought an animal must have came in and died or something. I round the corner, and I see this 7 to 9 foot tall reptilian being with its back turned to me. As soon as my eyes fell on it, it turned around. Its scales were a mixture of green and brown. Its eyes were yellow and had 2 slits for a nose and maybe a 3 foot or so tail. As soon as it looked at me, my eyes went kind of blurry, like when you've been crying, and my head started pounding, and blood started coming from my nose. I was too scared to move, and I didn't want to make any sudden movements and have it attack me. It stared at me for maybe 20 seconds before, in my head, I heard, "Leave the way you came, meat." As I started to back away, it pressed its hand on the wall. It had no seams, and a door slid open, and it walked through it. I booked it as fast as I could, jumped in my truck, and gunned it all the way home. I don't care if anyone believes me. I told my friend this, and he said I should definitely post it here. Does anyone have more information on these things? I've heard a little about them, but I assumed it was schizo shit. Hey X, I've been meaning to create a thread about some events in the past 2 months or so of my life, where my worldview of the paranormal and the afterlife flipped on its head in a very personal way. I figure there's no better time than now, alone, drinking some wine, to tell you all some of these things. I don't want my personal experience to permeate your worldview, as much as document it for all to see for themselves. About 2 months or so, maybe more, my father was involved with some weird types, and priestesses swayed his perspective through fortune-telling. Across all of our state, they all said the same. He would either be killed or sentenced to jail, which is for all intents and purposes a death sentence in my shithole. He was convinced, and thus began this ongoing spiritual journey, which ended very well for him. Before we go any further, I would like to add some context to Brazilian cults. Some long time ago, we had these things called slaves, and they were primarily brought against their will from many parts of Africa. Though their faiths were diverse, the new reality Brazil imposed caused some sort of ecumenism in their religions. The so-called orishas are archetypes, energies, as my father told me, which incarnated in African figures, energies that represent either some part of the world or the human psyche, and they lay claim over people like a shepherd over sheep. For example, my Orisha is Zango, the god of justice, while my father's is Ogum, the god of war. These entities were secretly worshipped through Catholic saints, associating each deity with some Christian figure. For example, St. George with Ogum, and sometimes turned overtly satanic, as in the case with Exus. And these are the more important entities in my story. Exus are essentially guardian angels. Though their general demeanor exudes a demonic aesthetic, they're little more than spiritual guides and material helpers. One, through appeasing his or her own Exus, can acquire what they desire, and such happened with my father, who escaped his previous dangerous life. The Exus demand altars and gifts such as alcohol and cigars, which they claim allows them to spread, filter, and control the energy of a place. Yes, they claim as Exus can speak to you through a host. All have an Exus, and this Exus can, should you be spiritually initiated enough, possess you in order to do as he or she pleases. Nothing too ominous, as my father and mother do little more than drink copious amounts of alcohol and smoke tons of cigars. Strangely enough, hosts do not feel the effects of alcohol intoxication at all, and multiple times I saw my father down entire bottles of whiskey, only to return completely sober. He who couldn't afford to drink a few beers at a time. The Exus, besides Atlas, alcohol, and cigars, also deemed offerings of raw meat and a special mandioca flour, often with a special type of oil and cigars and or flowers. These pots, almost akin to meals, are left to rot near their altars and are disposed in green soil afterwards, a crucial step in the rituals. The smell of rotten meat is sometimes unsettling for an outsider, but even worse are instances where the hosts eagerly consume these meals, as did my father, who ate an entire raw cow liver. The possessions may occur seemingly at random, though not all end in such debauchery. 2 times I was called before my father's Exus to be cleansed. My mother and I stood before him. His name is Seven, the King of Crossroads, and he compelled us to make our wishes. Wealth, protection, success, anything. And afterwards, he would spread the cigar smoke and the alcohol over us. I remember my first ritual of cleansing. A priestess and 3 or 4 other people came to our apartment. They would rub herbs, a life rooster, and a bag of popcorn on us and the walls before ripping open the rooster and stuffing him with the aforementioned herbs and popcorn. These carcasses full of negative energy are then disposed in a graveyard, or such. I even came to be a part of an exorcism. Agons, as we call them, are the tormented spirit of the dead, attracted to light and people, following them home only to plague their lives. My father spoke of their behavior, how they'll drop kitchen utensils in order to lick their contents, not unlike Buddhist hungry ghosts. A tip for all of you: don't light up candles during the first days of November, as it is when Egans leave their graveyards and roam the streets, only to follow the light of your candles into your homes. All in my family had sessions with the priestess. It was a square surrounded by gears, little collar things made of beads, with the colors of their respective orishas. She would throw smoke conches only to be able to guess, right in front of you, your most intimate secrets. My cousin and uncle cried in their sessions, and the priestess discovered, despite me and my father being completely clueless, about my mother's cancer, which she had been hiding from us. My session was nothing special. She did mention me being too spiritually closed off for her to see anything, but assured me that I had a greater purpose in our judicial system as a magistrate.